Well, folks, it's that time of year again for my NFL quarterback grades. This season, 36 quarterbacks qualified for this video. Now, again, just a little short rundown. How do quarterbacks qualify for this video? You have to have a minimum of at least 238 pass attempts. There are 17 games in the season, and you have to average at least 14 pass attempts per game. 17 times 14 equals 238. I know that's a quick math lesson for all of you. I know it seems like a specific number, but that's just how it goes. That's the way the NFL looks at things. Anyways, the video begins right after this. Before I begin, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, football fans, things are getting real. Get in on the action right now with my partners at DraftKings Sportsbook. They're offering all new customers $200 in bonus bets instantly after betting just $5. Don't let this slip away. Download the DraftKings app now and sign up using code BARRY. The crown is yours. Stay in on the action and use your $200 in bonus bets on DraftKings same-game parlays for a shot at an even bigger payout. Combine multiple bets together from the same game. Love the thrill of live betting? DraftKings has got you covered. Bet live on in-progress games right as they happen, making watching the game that much more exciting. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry, you can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use my promo code BARRY and bet just $5 on any wager and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code BARRY only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Starting off with Kyler Murray. Feels like with Kyler Murray that we do the same thing and have the same video made every single year. He's not a terrible quarterback by any means, but he just doesn't seem to be the guy that is going to get Arizona over the top and into contention, especially for a guy who was picked first overall. He's now been in the league for 6 seasons and he's missed the playoffs 5 times, and the one time he did make the playoffs, he happened to have one of the worst performances in NFL postseason history. He's basically the definition of mid. So I would give his grade C-. Kirk Cousins. Oh, how everything started off so great this season with Kirk Cousins getting a massive contract, but there was that pesky little nugget that the Falcons selected Michael Penix Jr. in the first round. But hey, guess what? It was supposed to be that Kirk Cousins had all of this season to figure things out, and it ended up not going that way. Cousins, for the most part, was pretty mediocre and had a major step back from his past season statistically, and therefore he was benched for the first round rookie with 3 games to go. But because the Falcons are still the Falcons, they ended up missing the playoffs anyway, despite Penix showing some signs that he might be a good quarterback. Anyway, as for Kirk Cousins, over his last 5 games of the season, he threw 1 touchdown and 9 interceptions. Yeah. So, but before that, he was doing pretty okay for himself. But now, with his age and his huge contract to be considered, who knows if he'll even play another down in the NFL. My grade? D. Lamar Jackson. Now, this is the point of the video where I point out that this is not going to take postseason play into account. And ironically enough, even though Lamar did not win a Super Bowl this year or even make it to the conference championship game, as you probably all know, he still did pretty well in the playoffs outside of a couple plays. Either way, this is strictly focusing just on the regular season, and Lamar had one of the greatest regular seasons of all time. I know people are sick of saying, oh, you got to stop giving him MVPs because he hasn't done anything in the playoffs, but when the guy deserves to win MVP, he deserves to win MVP, and that's what we saw this year. Over 4,100 yards, 41 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, while also running for over 900 yards and 4 more scores. Unbelievable. Grade A+. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes' favorite victim, is probably going to finish runner-up for MVP to Lamar Jackson, and he's also going to finish runner-up to Patrick Mahomes again in the postseason, as we know. But like I said, we're not on here to make fun of guys for losing in the postseason. Even though Lamar Jackson lost to Josh Allen, who lost to Patrick Mahomes for the 4th time in 5 years, is still it's a pretty tough scene. Either way, looking just at the regular season, Josh Allen had a great season, 28 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions, pass rating over 101, ran for 12 scores and 530 yards. In the games he started and finished, the Bills went 13-3, but again, Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, was better in the regular season, and so I can't say Allen gets an A+, but I'll say Allen gets a grade of he gets an A. He's the 2nd best quarterback in the league this year, arguably 3rd. Bryce Young. This is an interesting one because after a historically bad rookie season, Bryce Young came into this season and he was playing like dog shit again, and then he finally got benched for Andy Dalton, which is just really just a terrible thing to say about a quarterback. But then Dalton, of course, eventually sucked, and which gave the Panthers the green light to go back to Bryce Young, because hey, guess what? We spent the 1st overall pick on this guy, and our season's going nowhere. We have nothing else to really lose to see if this guy can get better. And to Young's credit, he came back and he did play a lot better than he was before, which really isn't saying much because the bar was in hell. But he did show show some signs of competency. However, his overall numbers, 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He did run for 6 scores. He still wasn't dominant or great by any means, but he earned himself another year with a couple good games and good performances in the latter part of the season. But still, taking everything into account, I'm going to have to give him a low grade. I'm going to give him a grade of D. Caleb Williams, first overall pick, very much anticipated, had a very, very inconsistent and mediocre at best regular season. Even though his raw numbers look good, he had 20 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, which is nice, but he also took 68 sacks. He lost 5 fumbles. The Bears offense with him was not that great. It looked like he maybe turned a corner early in the season, especially in the London game versus Jacksonville when he threw 4 touchdowns, but really that was the high point of the season. Again, he was a rookie player on the Bears, so I wasn't expecting him to become an MVP or anything, but they fired Matt Eberflus and they brought in Ben Johnson, who did wonders with Jared Goff. So I have not given up hope on Caleb Williams becoming a superstar yet. The highlights and the flashes are there. He still has the arm talent, but going off of what we saw just as a rookie, I'm going to have to give him a grade of D. Joe Burrow. This will go down for Burrow, as one of the greatest seasons to never make the playoffs for a quarterback. He completed over 70% of his passes. He had nearly 5,000 yards, threw for 43 touchdowns, just 9 interceptions, and he also ran for 2 more scores. But the Bengals went just 9-8, and they didn't make the playoffs, as I said. Now, even though Burrow's numbers were amazing and his defense was pretty shitty for most of the season, Burrow did have a couple mishaps in crunch time. I still believe he's overrated as a crunch time performer. I think that he's living off of that 2021 playoff run still, which is weird. I've never really seen a quarterback gain as much clout off of a playoff run where they didn't win the Super Bowl than Burrow has from that playoff run. But either way, he was very good or even great this year. He was let down by his defense. So people think I hate Joe Burrow. I think he's overrated when it comes to his clutch performance, but I still think he's a great quarterback. He's one of the best 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the league probably. But that's what happens in football sometimes. Sometimes your teammates let you down. So I'm going to give him a grade of A-, just because he had some crunch time mishaps. But overall, a great season for him. Jameis Winston. Again, I must reiterate this. It is amazing how Jameis Winston has been able to rebrand from a troublemaking, shitty quarterback who was accused of sexual assault multiple times to this lovable, goofy, dumb, fun-to-watch, devil-may-care quarterback. The fact is that Jameis Winston still sucks. He's always going to be famous for his 30 interception season, and he probably would have done that again, thrown for 30 interceptions, that is, had he played more games, but he replaced the injured Deshaun Watson, started a couple games. He ended up throwing 12 interceptions in just 7 starts, but he also threw 13 touchdowns, so he's literally a guy who is always capable of throwing for 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions at any given time. He doesn't care, so he's fun to watch in that sense, but as a quarterback, if you want to win games, he's not your guy, and not even all the great PR in the world could save him from getting benched for the last couple games of the season, so therefore I give him a grade of D-. Cooper Rush. Wow, what a guy Cooper Rush is, taking the place of the injured Dak Prescott around midseason. Cooper Rush performed about exactly how you'd expect. He completed just under 61% of his passes, was basically a game manager, had 12 touchdowns to 5 picks and 83.8 passer rating. His average yards per attempt was under 6, which is very bad. He didn't take that many sacks though. But again, Cooper Rush was just, again, like I said, your typical game manager. If you want to win big games, Cooper Rush is not your guy. But if you want to have a guy who can play well versus a shitty team like Carolina or the Giants, he's a guy that can help you. He's a nice spot starter every now and then. That's why the Cowboys have kept him around. But yeah, if he's going to be your guy for 8 or 9 games, then you're fucked. So my grade for him, I give him a D. The other Cowboys quarterback, Dak Prescott. Prescott was having one of the worst or lesser seasons of his career before he suffered a season-ending injury versus Atlanta around midway through the season. His numbers, ironically, aren't that much better than Cooper Rush's numbers, which really says a lot. Overall, for Dak Prescott, it seems like we just keep waiting for him to finally have one of those deep playoff runs, although I don't even know at this point if people even expect that from him anymore, because it's been 9 years. He's had 2 injury-shortened seasons. The other 7 years, he's never gotten past the divisional round. Every single time you start to believe in Dak Prescott, he always ends up fucking you over, which as an Eagles fan, I think is hilarious watching Cowboys fans get fucked over all the time. But overall, based on what he did this season, not very impressive. I give him a grade of D-. Bo Nix, the 35-year-old rookie quarterback for the Broncos, really was not that good for the first 6 6 or 7 games, he was just about as bad as I thought he was going to be. And then the second half of the season, he really seemed to turn it on. He actually finished with respectable numbers, 66% completion percentage, almost 3,800 yards, 29 touchdown passes, 12 interceptions, which is a little bit high. He did run for 4 touchdowns, and he also caught a touchdown. So he did show some signs of being the guy there for the long term for the Broncos, which is what they've been looking for ever since Peyton Manning retired. And we all know Sean Payton, he loves the white guys who can throw a lot of short passes like Drew Brees. But I don't know if I didn't really see anything. Like it wasn't a bad rookie season by any means, but I never really watched Bo Nix and was like, oh my god, this guy's going to be a superstar. I still think that ceiling wise, guys like Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels obviously are probably going to have better careers than him, but got to give him credit. He did bounce back. Again, when you take the full season into account though, I'll give him a grade of C-. Why not? Jared Goff. Remember, fellas and females, if there are any women watching this, I don't think there are, this is regular season only, and Jared Goff, with the help of Ben Johnson, had a terrific regular season, completing over 72% of his passes, 4,600 yards, 37 touchdowns to 12 interceptions with a 111.8 passer rating. He also caught a touchdown pass and led the Lions to the number 1 overall seed before they lost in the divisional round to Washington. But strictly just going on the regular season, Jared Goff, outside of a weird, wacky 5-interception game versus Houston, which the Lions still won, by the way, Jared Goff was amazing in the regular season. He was one of the best quarterbacks in the regular season, one of the 4 or 5 best players at that position during the regular season, so I'm going to have to give him a grade of A-. Jordan Love. Oh, look, if it isn't the Jeff Garcia of the Green Bay Packers. Love did his thing that he did as his first year as a starter, where he came out and he looked like crap, threw a bunch of interceptions, and then got on a little bit of a heater at the end of the season. But honestly, it was a disappointing season for the Packers. They were supposed to take the next step after making the divisional round last year. They ended up losing in the wild card round this year to my Eagles, and Love was horrible in that game. But overall, I don't really know what to make of Jordan Love. He has some flashes where he's good, but he still seems to kind of be just fair. He seems to be good, but people expecting him to be another first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback, the 3rd in a row for the Packers. If you have those type of expectations for Jordan Love, you're going to be disappointed. I give him a grade of C. CJ Stroud. Nobody even thought CJ Stroud was going to go through a sophomore slump at the beginning of the season, but that's exactly what happened. And after a pretty good start to the season, the first 5 or 6 games or so, Stroud just went into a haze where he took a lot of sacks, wasn't throwing a bunch of touchdowns, ended up throwing a bunch of interceptions. His final numbers were a big step back from his historically great rookie season, just 20 touchdowns to 12 interceptions and an 87 passer rating. Nothing very special about that. He also lost 4 fumbles, but because the Texans were in such a terrible division, they were able to get another playoff berth anyway, and Stroud did bounce back a little bit in the playoffs, but again, I'm not supposed to be taking that into account. I'm sorry. Strictly looking at the regular season, Stroud had one of the more disappointing regular seasons of any notable quarterback I can remember in recent memory. It wasn't horrible, but it certainly was not good. I give Stroud a grade of C-. Joe Flacco. Yes, that's right, folks. Joe Flacco is still alive and kicking. After his amazing showing with the Browns towards the end of last season, Flacco got a backup spot with the Colts to back up Anthony Richardson, and once Richardson was unsurprisingly injured, Flacco stepped in and seemingly left immediately off from where he was last year. He started out throwing a bunch of touchdowns and playing really well in his first couple games, but then he regressed back to being Joe Flacco, and his final numbers were really nothing to write home about, as he was alternating between the bench and the playing field. 12 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 90.5 rating, also losing 4 fumbles. I give him a grade of D. Anthony Richardson. As a lot of my longtime followers know, I've been on the Anthony Richardson train, Big Tony train, ever since he came out of Florida, but I think I have to get off of it after this year. He's consistently dealt with injuries, and when he's been on the field, he does have those amazing physical traits still, but the production just isn't there. I understand completion percentage isn't the end-all be-all, but Jesus Christ, this guy completed under 48% of his passes. He had more interceptions than touchdowns. The only real saving grace for him was that he was a great runner, and he ran for nearly 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. But when you have a quarterback and you draft a quarterback that highly, you don't draft them to just have a bunch of rushing touchdowns and terrible passing stats. So while the physical traits remain elite, and while he will probably get a bunch of chances in his career because of his unbelievable raw talent, he's a walking injury waiting to happen, and this year I'd have to give him a grade of D-. Mac Jones. Oh, McCorkle Jones. He's still alive after being sent away by New England to his hometown Jacksonville. Considering that Trevor Lawrence had been pretty durable for his first 3 seasons, there was no reason to believe that Mac Jones would see the field, but god damn it, that's exactly what happened, and Mac Jones performed about exactly how you would expect. Completed 8 touchdowns with 8 interceptions for a pretty bad 80.5 passer rating. He completed just 6.4 yards per attempt. He still has the body of a 50-year-old man. The only 2 wins that he had as a starter were against Tennessee, who's arguably the only team in the league worse than Jacksonville. So yes, if Mac Jones wanted the chance to show that he can be anything more than a backup after bombing out of New England, he failed to do so in this opportunity in Jacksonville. So I'm going to give him a grade of F. Trevor Lawrence. Well, another year has gone by, and another year where Trevor Lawrence did not live up to the generational prospect expectations that he was given. Completed just under 61% of his passes, not good, for 11 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. He did run for 3 scores. All the physical tools are still there, but for whatever reason, he just hasn't seemed to really put it together. It looked like he was going to put it together towards the end of his second season into the early part of his third season, but he regressed in his fourth year, as did the Jaguars entirely. And although he still is with the team, and although he's still seen as the franchise quarterback, one has to wonder if he will ever reach the heights that he was expected to coming out of high school and out of Clemson. At this stage, I don't think he will. But with that said, I'm going to give him a grade of D-. Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes is one of the weirdest guys to grade because looking just at his raw numbers, his numbers really weren't that spectacular, but at the same time, the Chiefs in his 16 starts went 15-1 and got the 1 seed, and he also ran for a couple scores, and he seemed to come up with plays in big spots to give the Chiefs just enough every single game to win, but the overall numbers for the second year in a row really are far below the first 5 seasons of his career and far below GOAT standards. Now, for Mahomes, as we all know, it seems like he and the Chiefs and Andy Reid kind of treat the regular season like target practice instead of taking it seriously. I don't know how true that is, but it definitely does seem to have some merit when you watch Mahomes step up his play in the playoffs. The Chiefs and Mahomes are simply kind of bored at this point, I guess. But either way, it doesn't change the fact that his performance, for him, 26 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, was pretty mediocre, and therefore, strictly going off of just this regular season, I'm going to give him a grade of C-. Justin Herbert. In Justin Herbert's first season under Jim Harbaugh, man of integrity, he kind of reverted into a souped-up version of what Alex Smith was for Harbaugh with the 49ers, playing things safe and not turning the ball over, at least until the postseason. But again, we're not taking the postseason into account. Still, despite Herbert throwing 23 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions in 17 starts, and the Chargers going 11-6 and making the playoffs, and Herbert having pretty good efficiency metrics, it still feels like they left some meat on the bone, so to speak. They should have won a couple more games, and maybe that would have given them a different outcome in the postseason. I don't know, but with Herbert, it just seems like he's a good quarterback, but he's not going to be one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the league that we thought he would be a couple years ago. That whole Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar tier, I don't know if he's ever going to be there. He seems to be like in the tier below that, but either way, based on just the regular season, I give Herbert a grade of B-. John Matthew Stafford. Once again, Matthew Stafford put in a respectable season, as he's done for basically the last 15 years for the most part. Respectable is essentially what Stafford does. He doesn't really have any amazing seasons. He has had a couple really, really good seasons, but for the most part, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get 20 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, a 94 passer rating, 7.3 yards per attempt. Again, it's respectable. It's not great. It's not terrible. He's not a terrible quarterback. The Rams did make the playoffs again, although their defense in the last week of the season, last part of the season, was a big reason for that. Stafford will still have a couple games every year where you just make your jaw drop and go, wow, how is this guy not the best quarterback of all time, because his arm talent is so insane. It's still insane. He still throws a beautiful ball, but the inconsistency is just always going to be there, and that's why I have to give him a grade of C. Aiden O'Connell. Going into this season, there wasn't even a certainty as to who would be the Raiders starting quarterback, whether it would be Aiden O'Connell or whether it would be Gardner Minshew. Now, that's a terrible quarterback battle because both those guys suck, and that was no different this season. O'Connell, I don't really know what he's supposed to bring to the table. First, he stole Derek Carr's number, and then he stole Ken Stabler and Rich Gannon's number, and he continued to play like crap, and he and Minshew, they alternated getting benched, and so that's kind of basically how it went. He wasn't very good, and now with the Raiders having a top pick in the draft this year, they're probably going to pick a quarterback, and so that we've probably seen the end of Aiden O'Connell as a starter for the Raiders. So I give him a grade of D-. Gardner Minshew. Basically everything I said about Aiden O'Connell can also be applied to Gardner Minshew, who threw for 9 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. He has no future future with the Raiders, and he's never really going to be more than a guy who's a capable spot starter, but if he is your full-time starter, you're going to be in big doo-doo because he has diminishing returns the longer he plays. Overall, I give him a grade of D-, just like Aiden O'Connell. Tua Tagovailoa. Tua once again ran into concussion problems earlier this year, causing him to miss 4 games. When he was on the field, he was once again productive, and the Miami Dolphins were a good team, but when he wasn't on the field, when he was missing games, the Dolphins were horrible offensively. They didn't even look like an NFL caliber team offensively. So I do think Tua maybe gets slightly underrated a little bit in terms of how valuable he is, but he's a guy that when he's out there, he can put up good numbers, but if it's in cold weather for big games, I don't know how. I mean, he still doesn't really have a signature win, and he's been in the NFL for 5 years. Like, I don't really know what his most signature win is. He still hasn't won a playoff game, so, I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I think he's improved mightily under Mike McDaniel, but at the same time, I do believe there's always this nagging sense that the Dolphins could do better than Tua, and also his concussion problems are always going to be there, so you never know about the long term with him. But as for just the 2024 season, what he did on the field, I'm going to give him a grade of B-. Sam Darnold. It's unbelievable, actually, that Sam Darnold, coming into the season, was considered one of the biggest draft busts in NFL history, and rightfully so. And that reflected my opinion when I was talking about preseason predictions and how the teams were going to finish. I said the Vikings were going to finish 2-15. That obviously did not happen. But I was correct in saying that Darnold, although he had a phenomenal season, throwing for 35 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, he would at some point regress back to being Sam Darnold. And unfortunately for Vikings fans everywhere, that happened at the most important games of the season, especially the last week of the season versus the Lions. But still, it was a great season for Darnold. It really resurrected his career. But now that J.J. McCarthy's going to be healthy, the Vikings want to see what they have in him. So he'll be on a new team next year, I fully believe. But still, as for what he accomplished on the field this year, he did take a lot of sacks, but the Vikings went 14-3. It was a great season. I'm going to say that Sam gets a B grade. Derek Carr. I've always been 100% on the mark about Derek Carr. Every single fucking time, I've always been right. I say Derek Carr, he's a motherfucking tease, and he did the same exact shit this year, although it wasn't exactly the same as years past because he missed 7 games. He was 5-5 in 10 games as a starter, but the first 2 games of the year, the Saints came out on fire. Derek Carr, is he going to win MVP? And then no. He ends up falling flat on his face, and his numbers decline. He still had good numbers, though, in the 10 games he did play, and the Saints did not win a game that he missed. So he's a typical guy. He's, always going to be in that kind of Kirk Cousins territory, that Kirk Cousins tier, where he has nice numbers, but he's just a boring loser. He's a tremendous loser. That's all I can say about Derek Carr. He's a tremendous loser. He's going to find ways to lose games for you. But as for his grade for the 2024 season, who gives a fuck? I'll give him a C. Why not? Drake May. After sitting on the bench for the first 5 weeks behind Jacoby Brissett for no reason, the Patriots finally put their top 3 pick into the game and started him, and the team results were about what you would expect. The Patriots didn't win a lot of games, but Drake May did show some flashes of really high potential, although he also had a penchant for turning the ball over, as he had 16 turnovers in just 12 starts, once you include interceptions and lost fumbles together. But still, I think I saw enough from Drake May to believe that he was a smart choice. However, is Mike Vrabel going to get the most out of Drake May moving forward? We don't really know. Vrabel seems like more of the same with Gerard Mayo, more like just typical old school, just pound the rock on first and second down and throw it on third. Who knows? I wouldn't be super ecstatic about the hire for Drake May's fantasy purposes, but either way, I think Drake May had a decent rookie season based on the terrible position he was in and the terrible team he was on, but still, you have to take it and you have to evaluate everything, so I give him a grade of D. Daniel Jones. Finally, the Giants pulled the plug on the Daniel Jones era, and as an Eagles fan, it brings tears to my eyes, and I don't mean happy tears, I mean sad tears, because now we might not get a free 2 wins per season like we were every single year with Daniel Jones under center for the Giants. He now is on the Vikings, but now he's probably going to be somewhere else. Before he got cut and traded, he threw for 8 touchdowns to 7 interceptions for a 79.4 passer rating. More of the same dog shit. He cannot do anything besides run the ball. He's a good runner, but other than that, he is absolute shit. So I'm going to give him a grade of F. Aaron Rodgers. On the bright side, Aaron Rodgers statistically had one of the best seasons of any quarterback in Jets history, throwing for 28 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. On the other side, the season was an absolute disaster for the Jets. And although it wasn't all Rodgers' fault, he once again had his clutch time problems. The Jets defense went in the tank after Robert Saleh was fired. Didn't matter whether they traded for Devontae Adams. The Jets just did not produce or live up to anybody's expectations. Rodgers, they don't even know if he's going to be back with the Jets. Does anybody even want him? Is he going to retire? Who knows? But this is the second year in a row. We're not forgetting his 2023 season where he barely played, but you talk about his last year in Green Bay. 2023, he misses the entire year essentially. And then this year, 2024, he hasn't had a good season since 2021 when he last won MVP. So the days of Aaron Rodgers being an elite quarterback, they're over. They are done for. But at least he finally threw for 300 yards in a game again, even though they lost that game. So either way, I'd give Aaron Rodgers a grade of D. Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is one of those guys that is really never going to get the amount of respect he deserves. And people are always quick to give credit to everybody else besides Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a winner. He's done a lot of great things. He rushes for a shitload of touchdowns, and I understand everybody's like, oh, the tush push, it's not impressive. Well, you can suck my balls, because the tush push, in order to get down into position on the goal line, you need a quarterback who can move the fucking football effectively, and that's what Jalen Hurts does. So after a little bit of a step backwards at the end of last season, Jalen Hurts came back to life this year, finished with a 103.7 passer rating, averaged over 8 yards per attempt, and yes, he's in the Super Bowl again for the second time in 3 years, but I'm not taking that into consideration here. He ran for 14 scores. Overall, I'd give Jalen Hurts a grade of B+. Russell Wilson missed the first 6 games of the season, and people in Pittsburgh were clamoring for Justin Fields, which is very, very sad. But Wilson came back, and he performed better than he did with the Broncos, that's for sure. But still, he's a far cry from the star quarterback we saw all those years with Seattle. But it's not like his numbers were terrible or anything. He had 16 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, a healthy 95.6 passer rating. He will take a lot of sacks, which is what he did, but he's always been known for that. He ran for a couple scores. He had a couple fumbles. He really is still a boomer bust quarterback. He still throws a great deep ball, but he's just not what he once was. But still, I would say he had a respectable season, although he did kind of fall off the map at the end, losing 4 games in a row and then losing a playoff game. But I would give him a grade of C-, just because the ending of the season was really bad. Geno Smith. Year 3 of the Geno Smith redemption product was mixed results. He completed over 70% of his passes, 4,300 yards, but he threw just 21 touchdowns to 15 interceptions, and despite the Seahawks going 10-7, they missed the playoffs for the second straight season. Geno has become basically the definition of a mid quarterback. That's really what you can say about him. That's all you can say about him at this point. He's a mid quarterback, but he can make some amazing highlight throws. He's got great arm talent, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't translate as well to the stat sheet as it has in prior seasons. This is probably his worst year as a starter with the Seahawks, so I would say maybe they are going to be looking for a new starter soon. Who knows? But either way, I give him a grade of C+. Brock Purdy. All the people who have been saying that Brock Purdy actually sucks for the last couple seasons, even though he's put up unbelievable numbers, they had a little bit of a victory lap this year as Purdy's numbers decreased, although they were still very good as he threw for 8.5 yards per attempt. He ran for 5 scores. Sneaky athlete. And despite missing a couple games, threw for nearly 4,000 yards. So the stats were still good, but they were a step down from his first couple seasons, and especially last year. The 49ers had an unbelievably disappointing season where they didn't even come close to making the playoffs after finishing this close to winning the whole thing in 2023. And I think Purdy's regression was a big part of that, although Christian McCaffrey wasn't playing. But then again, if you need a team full of all-stars around you to be good, are you really that good? Still, I think Brock Purdy's good. I've said it really ever since he came into the league. I think he's got a noodle arm, but he throws the ball downfield a lot, which is what I can respect about him, even though he has a derp face, and I kind of want to punch him in the face because he has a derp-looking face like John Harbaugh. But still, I think he's a good quarterback, and I'm sure the 49ers will bounce back next year because they always seem to do that. But anyway, the grade, I'll give him a grade of C+. Baker Mayfield. What an unbelievable year for Baker Mayfield. Even though the Bucs went just 10-7, Baker Mayfield completed over 71% of his passes for 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, but he also did have a bit of a bugaboo when it came to turnovers. He threw 16 interceptions, but he also became the first Buccaneers quarterback to make back-to-back Pro Bowls. That's unbelievable because the Buccaneers, as far as I can remember, haven't had any good quarterbacks in my lifetime, besides maybe Brad Johnson. Either way, Baker showed that his resurrection in Tampa in 2023 was not a fluke, and he looks to be the Buccaneers quarterback of the future as long as he can stay healthy. So I'm happy for him. I like the way he plays, so I'm going to give him a grade of B-, and it would be higher if not for all those pesky interceptions. But hey, he plays the game a certain way. He plays the game an exciting way, and I can respect that about him. Will Levis. I mean, I'm not going to spend a lot of time time on this guy. Will Levis, he stinks. The guy sucks. Let's just be real. He's terrible. He's more known for making memes than he is for winning games and throwing touchdowns. I said the Buccaneers. Yeah, duh. The Titans are the worst team in the league, and a large part of that is because they give Will Levis some snaps. They benched him for Mason Rudolph, and Mason Rudolph sucks too, so they went back to Levis, and he continued to be terrible. He might have a couple of highlights where he'll throw the ball downfield, and he'll have like 1 or 2 deep touchdown passes every year, which is nice, and I can respect that, but overall, the guy stinks. I give him a grade of F. And finally, Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels had one of the more successful rookie seasons of any quarterback in NFL history. He threw 25 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, had pass rating over 100. He also ran for nearly 900 yards and 6 touchdowns, and he also looked the part. He was dropping back, making throws, so it wasn't a gimmicky type of thing like RG3, although Marcus Mariota did look pretty good when taking his place. No, I'm just kidding. I think Daniels is the real deal, and he kind of had the year similar to what CJ Stroud had last year, where CJ Stroud had an all-time great rookie year last year. Daniels had one this year. So I'm going to say I give Jayden Daniels a grade of B.